Hi, everyone. Welcome to Question Period Rewind. I'm Donna Skelly, Speaker of the Legislative Assembly of Ontario. 1986, what a year. In Toronto, a TTC ride was 45 cents for kids and $1 for adults. Over at Honest Ed's, you could get a pair of pantyhose for 77 cents. And the population of Ontario was about 9 million people. Now, let's see what the hot topics were for the province at that time.
Oral questions. The Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I thought we would go back to the Minister of Housing today, and I'm sending over to the Minister once again a copy of the analysis I sent over yesterday, trusting that perhaps by now Gardner Church has been able to go through Bill 51 once again with the Minister so that he can assure the tenants of this province that they won't be facing a 22 to 25% rent increase as a result of Bill 51. Now, you recall yesterday, Minister, I pointed out to you that a 22% rent increase could result from a 5% to 5.25% increase in the guideline rate, 5% in financing costs, 5% in capital improvements, 2% for chronically depressed adjustment, and 5% for equalization payment. I trust the Minister will agree that the last two categories, chronically depressed and equalization payments, which allow a 7% increase on their own, are not currently allowed under the current law, would be allowed under 51, and therefore, at the very least, there will be a 7% increase over the base rate in addition to what's being paid today. Would the Minister agree to that?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I trust that the Honourable Leader of the Opposition knows, too, that buildings that were built after 1976 are not under the rent review regulations now. So there are increases in excess of 20, worst case now. So I just want to inform you about that, inform the Honourable Leader about that. So this Bill 51 will bring much more saving to the tenants than the previous bills.
Supplementary?
Well, not to cut this point too finely, but the example I was giving the Minister, in which he has performed, is for a building built before 1975. Now, to deal with the building built before 1975, could you explain for me which of the 5 rental adjustments, which I suggest are all permitted under Bill 51, will not apply? Because if you can't answer that question, then you must acknowledge that the rents in the pre-75 buildings could go up, under the example I've offered you, as much as 22.25%.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, let me point out to the Honourable Leader of the Opposition again that what I was saying is that Bill 51 includes those buildings that built after 1975, and I was trying to say to you that you may know that, but may not understand what it means, that more tenants are protected now under this bill, so as far less increase will, on the average, will be given to tenants. The case that you put forward here are quite inaccurate. You're saying that if someone come before the hearings board, all these things would be given. We're saying all these things will be taken into consideration. I've answered you yesterday when I told you that all these situations will be taken under consideration in Bill 51.
Final supplementary?
Well, I say to the Minister, he may be surprised to hear this, but we do know that the post-75 buildings are included under the legislation. And what we want to do is try to assure the pre-75 tenants that their rents aren't going to skyrocket as a result of your legislation. Now, I want to ask the Minister this point. He is trying to pretend that these things may be given by the board. wouldn't the minister agree that under his legislation, it's not a matter of may. Under his legislation, a landlord, if he can satisfy these 5 headings, has a right and will be given these increases amounting to 22% if he can just file the appropriate information. Now, either he has a right under 51 to do that, or they do not. Which is it, Minister?
Minister?
Again, you've given me this hypothetical situation here. The honourable member has. In the first instance, Mr. Speaker, that he talks about a chronic depressed rent for $500. We have not seen chronic depressed rents at $500 per month. So immediately, this example you give here is wrong. And furthermore, you have talked about a guideline being given at 5.2, and then if one is asking for any other above the guideline, then they would not get the guideline then. They get guideline -1. So again, your situation you have given here is wrong.
New question?
Could you send in
New
Gardner
question?
Church tomorrow? Because he will tell us in the House that you are
New question?
absolutely wrong on all the information you've just offered. Absolutely wrong.
New
I have
question?
a question to the minister responsible for fire sales, the Minister for Transportation and Communication. I wonder if the minister could begin today to fess up to some of the facts on the sale of UTDC. Perhaps the minister could begin by telling us how much the province got on closing of the UTDC sale and how much the province has paid to Lavalin as of October 31st.
Minister?
Mr. Speaker, the terms of the sale to Lavalin Incorporated calls for a $10 million cash payment, which the Leader of the Opposition is aware of, a further $20 million debenture, and a percentage of the profits, which we believe, and certainly they believe, will be of great benefit to the taxpayers of this province.
Supplementary?
Well, the minister did not answer part of the question. The other part of my question, of course, was how much has the province paid to Lavalin? The minister's information is right. Lavalin has paid the government $10 million. However, as of October 31st, pursuant to the documents that we finally got from you, the following payments will have been made from the government to Lavalin. A $2.2 million management fee, $11 million for overhead costs, a return, would you believe, of Lavalin's deposit. First time I've ever seen a deal where you give back the deposit on closing. $1.5 million for first year's R&D, $1.9 million worth of R&D for ALRT technology, $660,000 for the buyout of Hawker Siddeley's 20%, and $9 million prepayment by GO on the contract, which means by October 31st, the government will have sent payments to Lavalin totaling $27,348,712 and received in exchange $10 million from Lavalin.
Question.
Would you confirm that, where it gets worse and not finished, would you confirm that this flow of funds is correct?
Minister?
Mr. Speaker, the member continues to attempt to answer his own questions. I don't know why he bothers wasting the time of this House asking, and then only to detail the very answers contained in the documents that we have continued to release on the day that they were made available. I have the dates from day one of all the documents relative to the sale, relative to the letters of intent, and so on, contains the information the member just introduced to the House.
You mean my documents are accurate? You mean that you have received $10 million from Lavalin and handed them a check for $27.3 million? Let's make a deal. Let's make a deal.
Final supplementary.
Don't let him near Manaki. Now, my final question to the minister is this. He has said he got a $20 million debenture back $20 million debenture back. Could the minister confirm? Could the minister confirm that as of today's date, the debenture has not been signed, that the debenture has not yet been executed or signed? And could he also confirm today that the reason the debenture hasn't been signed is because you have given Lavalin the right to reduce the amount of the debenture in the event their tax position is such that it is a taxable benefit to Lavalin, in which case you have agreed to adjust the sales price to pay the tax load to Lavalin?
Minister?
No, I would not confirm the statements made by the Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Speaker, and he fully knows that the dollars included on the monthly amounts that previously stated are the very same dollars that UTDC would, in the normal process of doing business, have to cover those costs.
New question. New question, the member for York South.
Mr. Speaker, I have a question for the Minister of Consumer and Commercial Relations. There are reports this morning that the minister is producing a plan with respect to changes in car insurance, which reports from our experience usually stem from an inspired leak of one kind or another. I just want to find out how inspired the leak was, Mr. Speaker, and that's why I'm addressing this question to the source of much of the inspiration for the insurance industry, the Minister of Consumer and Commercial Relations. I wonder if the minister can confirm that the government is about to introduce a plan which would result in higher benefits as far as those who are injured in accidents are concerned, at the same time continue to give the monopoly to the delivery of insurance to the private sector, to private profit insurance companies, and can he tell us how it will be possible to have a higher benefit plan that's paid for by the private profit insurance companies and at the same time result in substantial savings for Ontario drivers,
Minister?
which is one of the claims that's contained in the leak today.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the Leader of the third party for his question, but he correctly identified it as a leak. It's not something that I'm prepared to discuss. We'll tell you, though, that as a result of Dr. Slater's report, I am looking into the whole area of automobile insurance as I'm looking into all of the other recommendations that he made.
Supplementary? Supplementary?
Mr. Speaker, this is silly. I mean, you cannot float an idea based on a detailed scheme with detailed numbers in the Toronto Star, and we know how that works. We know how the system operates around here. We know how it operated for years. You can't float that kind of scheme. One day when we'll find out too. You can't float that kind of information with detailed schemes and then say you're not prepared to discuss it with the House. Is there a scheme? Is there a scheme that's going to deal with the insurance industry? And if there isn't, why isn't there such a proposal or some such idea that will deal with the problem facing drivers, the rip-off in the current system? You can have it both ways. If you're not going to do something, why aren't you going to do something?
Minister?
Mr. Speaker, I didn't say that we weren't going to do anything. All I'm saying to you is that purported information that's in the paper is just that. It is purported, and when I'm ready to introduce it, I will.
Final supplementary. Final supplementary.
Speaker, there's something strange about the conduct of public business. The minister has had a report from Dr. Slater. That report has come down. It's indicated the direction that he thinks the government should go in. The material is being discussed with Cabinet, and we now have the issuance of an inspired leak of one kind or another. Is the minister saying that the statement contained in the press today has no substance to it whatsoever?
It's false.
Minister?
Mr. Speaker, all I'm saying to the Leader of the third party is that I have no responsibility for what appears in the newspapers. And when the time comes, I will bring forward my recommendations.
Good answer. Good answer.
New question, the member for Riverdale.
Mr. Speaker, I have a question for the Premier. The Premier boasts loudly and repeatedly about government without walls. Yet, Wang and Dansky, experienced and successful developers in this city, felt that they had to hire Mr. Ivan Fleischman, a Liberal lobbyist, in order to get access to a Liberal government program. Will the Premier now tell this House that all that has really changed in Ontario is the colour of the ties? Is this the kind of stewardship that the Premier advocates for this province?
Premier?
I say to my honourable friend that Wang and Dansky, in his position to hire whoever they want to do whatever they feel is appropriate in the circumstances. But I want to tell my honourable friend this, and I'll, through you to others, give the very clear message that no one gets special favor or treatment in any way. I'm familiar with the innuendo that you're trying to suggest, and others have as well. I've read about the comments of some, including Gail Martin and others, who would like to impute motive, and that's, I guess, fair pool, because that's motives being imputed all the time. But I have asked the Deputy Minister for a complete review of the circumstances, and he tells me that it is absolutely handled in the normal course of events as many other applications in similar circumstances.
Order. 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 I'm willing to wait until the members are ready to listen. Okay. Supplementary, the member for Riverdale.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the Premier's careful review, he may have come across these other names in addition to Mr. Fleischman. Mr. David Appel, Vice President of Wang and Dansky. Mr. Bram Appel, Director, Harbourfront Corporation. Mr. David Greenspan, Chairman, Ontario Housing Corporation. Mrs. June Rowlands, Councillor, City of Toronto. Mr. Arthur Eggleton, Mayor of City of Toronto. All of them Liberals, all of them connected in some way with the circumstances surrounding this loan. Mr. Speaker, we have had evidence before the House that Mr. Fleischman received $30,000 in lunch money from the public purse to arrange a deal in the WIDA affair. Now we have this situation. Will the Premier not now stand before this House and commit his government to bringing in legislation to control these finders' fees, to control the lobbyists that are being paid with public monies
Premier?
In the last analysis?
Premier?
I say to my, he'll be aware that most people in the province are Liberals now, so I can't account for that particular list that you want to name, or names you would like to drag in, or I can drag in, mention a lot of other names, but I'm not sure what that accomplishes. If my honourable friend has some evidence of some special treatment or favor, then he has an obligation to present that, because I want to, when you make that kind of an allegation, I'm sure you'll be aware, you're alleging some kind of criminal activity. And, well, I'm telling you, my honourable friend is quite wrong about that. When you're suggesting because of someone is who they are, they're getting special or preferential treatment, I say to you that that is a criminal activity, and you should bring that forward.
Order.
Now, I've read some of those names in the paper that you mentioned, and you're suggesting, presumably, that something was untoward or some great conspiracy in that particular regard. Look, I have no idea why Wang and Dansky hired him or anyone else in the circumstances. That presumably is a free market decision. But any more than I have any understanding of why you've hired Pierre Burton to tell you why your party isn't extinct. I mean, I can't explain these kind of decisions that you or they make, and everyone has the right to make those. But I say to my honourable friend, and so the message is very, very clear, everywhere, in the public service and outside of the public service, that no one has any special privileges. Everyone has a right to speak to their government, regardless of political persuasion, regardless of where they come from, and everybody has a right to fair, even-handed treatment in this government.
Final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, one would expect a Premier of a province to have a firmer hand on the tiller. Under the Orkle program,
I guess the member doesn't have a... Final supplementary. I'm sure everyone will pay attention.
Under the Orkle ORCL program, now defunct, Wang and Dansky received $1,413,720, which produced 10 units of rent-geared income housing. How dare the Premier, in the midst of a housing crisis so deep that the hostels in Metro cannot keep up with demand, continue to squander public money in a way so shameful and in a way that will produce so pitifully small a mitigation of the misery on our streets.
Premier?
Mr. Speaker, I'm not. You raised, I gather, another issue. Do you? I'm not familiar with the facts that you raised in this particular example, and I'm sure that you'd be the first to agree that I personally should not review all the applications under the Convert to Rent program. I say to my honourable friend, they're handled in a bureaucratic way. The regulations under which they complied were regulations brought in by the former government, not our government. You would, I guess, be critical of these 502 units that are being built. And I find it, I say for my friend opposite, a little strange that when you're the first to admit that we have a housing crisis, a shortage of units, when there's real activity going on, you're the first one to stand up and criticize. Now, you can't have it both ways. I mean, perhaps you revel in misery. I don't know. But we're trying to solve the problems, not just sit there and yap from the back.
New question, the member for Brantford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Housing and arises directly out of the Premier's last statement. We too are interested in how public funds are expended in Ontario in this day and age. I would like to ask the Minister if he would confirm to the House that Mrs. Paulette Fleischmann, the wife of Mr. Ivan Fleischmann, was involved in the organization of 2 fundraising dinners for the Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'll be glad to answer that. No, she was not involved in 2 fundraising for my dinner.
She's involved as town secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We know that Mrs. Fleischmann was involved in fundraising for the Minister. If it wasn't 2 dinners, can the Minister tell us how many it was?
7.
I don't know if any Mrs. Pauline Fleischmann anyhow.
New question. New question, the member for
End of his career.
I wonder... Order. New question. If everyone will remain silent. Order. 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 I'm waiting for a little silence. Point of order?
Order. I wonder if the Attorney General, Mr. Speaker, while he yells across the floor waiting for the question, realizes that the people of Ontario are watching this.
Order. 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 Would the honourable member take a seat? Order. Order. I'd like to inform the member for Nipissing that that is not a point of order. 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 No, it wasn't. Order. Order. I apologize to the member for Lake Nipigon, but I believe you wanted to ask a question. Yes.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a question for the Premier, Mr. Speaker. I hope that the recently baptized Chief Eternal Light of the Heaven can still hear the drum. Well, we helped organize, Mr. Speaker, the rally that is presently taking place for self-determination.
Order. The member for York Mills and the member for Essex North. Order. 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 The member for Lake Nipigon.
Merci, Monsieur l'Orateur.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Premier will be cognizant of the importance of self-determination for our First Canadians. While the Constitution, Mr. Premier, does guarantee indeed the rights of all Canadians, it fails to recognize, because it only does affirm and recognizes the Aboriginal and treaty rights. Will the Premier give this House the commitment, and more important, ourselves Canadians, the unqualified commitment that he will send a message of support? And I'm dealing here, sir, with Article 35(1) of the Constitution, and please feel free to check with the sous-chef to your immediate left. Will you give the guarantee that you will indeed ask the Government of Canada to substitute the word guarantee for what now exists in terms of the lack of guarantee in our Constitution under Article 35?
Like him, I was moved by the rally that we participated in today. You'll be aware of the things that I said, as well as things the Attorney General said, and some of the great progress that has been made in the last year. That's not to say for a moment that there's not much more progress to make as well. With respect to the discussions on Section 35, they are ongoing, as you know. The issue is the word existing in the Constitution. I'm told by the Attorney General, the Minister responsible, that those discussions are ongoing with his peers. It's our intention and our hope to try to come to an agreement with the other provinces and indeed the federal government to entrench those Aboriginal rights, and that's one of the subjects around which the discussions are going at the moment.
Supplementary, the member for York South.
By way of supplementary, I wonder if the Premier can today in this House give us the guarantee, which will be of great importance to the Native people of Ontario. Can he give us the guarantee that no change or amendment will be supported by the Government of Ontario unless it has the full and complete support of the Native community in the province of Ontario?
Premier?
Mr. Speaker, I understand the intent of your question, and I'm not in a position to give you an absolutely bald, flat assurance on that particular point. I can say to you, I believe that we are working very closely. Like many other groups in society, there are different points of view, and that's understandable in the circumstances. But I think that the mode of cooperation that we've established is a good one. I believe that they have seen significant progress, and I believe at this moment they have faith in the Attorney General, who is negotiating on their behalf. But I certainly am anxious to represent their interests with a clear voice. I can't say they'll approve every single point that we make, but I think that you will find, when it comes out in the wash, that we're speaking on the same wavelength.
New question? The member for Kenora.
Speaker, in the absence of the Minister of Industry, Trade and Technology, I'll direct my question to the Minister of Natural Resources. Mr. Minister, we have just learned today that Mackenzie Forest Products have given layoff notices to 44 of their employees at the Hudson operation. We've just learned that Atikokan Forest Products have given layoff notices to 30 of their employees. We've just learned today that Great West Timber in Thunder Bay have given off layoff notices to 49 of their sawmill employees. And we've also learned today that Northern Wood Forest Products of Thunder Bay have given layoff notices to 49 of their employees. Mr. Minister, a total of 172 sawmill workers have been given their layoff notices as the direct lack of this government's interest and concern, and in fact their indifference to the recent 15% countervailing duty imposed by the U.S. authorities on softwood entering that particular country. My question, Mr. Speaker, is what is the minister planning to do for these 172 employees and all the other sawmill workers in Northern Ontario who are now facing the prospects of a very bleak Christmas and a jobless winter?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this government has made representation across the country with other ministries of forestry and indeed the federal representatives. It's understood very clearly that unless the Prime Minister of this country takes action, because he himself, as Pat Carney has said, is that the decision that was handed down by the Commerce Department in the US of A was one that was grossly unfair and certainly not without influence because of the elections in the United States. You, sir, should know that there has to be a great deal of pressure brought forward by the Prime Minister of this country if we're going to resolve trade problems with the US of A. Ask yourself.
Is that your supplementary? Supplementary, the member for Cochrane South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister of Natural Resources, it's provincial policies that were under attack in Washington. You failed to be there. You failed to fight for Ontario jobs. We've given you details over the last 2 weeks of layoffs in Chapleau, in Timmins, in Atikokan, and Thunder Bay. What we want to know is not what you're going to do to try and cover your case now after the fact in Washington. We want to know what you're going to do for these workers who are out of work. What employment programs are you going to bring in to put them back to work in communities across Northern Ontario?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this issue, as I've described, was one that this government pursued with vigor. We did attend at every meeting that we were asked to with the Pat Carney, with Mr. Merrithew, with Mr. Kelleher, with Mr. Clark. We made good presentations on behalf of the province of Ontario. And as I've said before, the initiative has to be taken by the federal government. We're supporting them every step of the way, and we're doing everything we can to prove that Ontario is not guilty of any substantial initiatives that would interfere with a fair price for lumber in the US of A. And I have to tell you that unless the initiative is carried forward by the minister, by the federal Prime Minister, that we in Ontario will not waste our time. We'll do everything we can to be helpful. And that's where it's at. We're fighting that fight, and we're going to do everything on behalf of the province of Ontario to support the initiatives of the federal government in Washington.
Your question, the member for Lakeshore.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask a question to the Minister of the Environment about his acid rain control program. I had hoped to have the opportunity to raise these questions in the Select Committee on the Environment, but as that body has never yet met, I'd like the Minister to comment on the first 6-month status report from Ontario Hydro about their progress towards countdown acid rain. Does the Minister accept Hydro's contention that by using nuclear power, they can avoid installing scrubbers on their coal-fired plants until the mid-1990s?
Minister.
A member will know that when we brought in this particular program, one of the items that I emphasized, which I think is important when we bring in a program of this kind, is that the specific technology not be dictated to any of the people who are involved in the regulations, the 4 main polluters, for instance, and instead that they employ the technology to abate the sulfur dioxide and reduce the acid rain that they felt was appropriate. There are a number of those options that are available to Hydro. One, of course, which is one I think the member would agree with, is conservation is an important component of that. The second component would be wet scrubbers as one of the options. A third is limestone injection, which at the present time is being experimented with at the Lakeshore Generating Station, that the member would be very familiar with. Fourth is to purchase lower sulfur coal that is available, some of it in Canada itself, in Western Canada. That would probably assist Western Canada economically as well as being of some assistance in this regard. A fifth is to look at other fuels that might be available, natural gas, for instance, that might be used. That's one option. I'm not saying they'll exercise that. So there are a number of particular options that they could exercise, even the purchase of power from Manitoba or Quebec if they wanted to go in that direction.
Order.
So those are the options that are available to hydro.
Supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, all the minister has done is describe the options that were available to hydro before he announced his programme. He hasn't commented on their predilection for substitution of nuclear for coal-fired plants, and that was what the question was about. I'd like to say to the minister that in 1981, the then Minister of the Environment, Harry Parrott, announced that hydro would immediately begin retrofitting coal-fired plants with scrubbers. Now hydro's telling you that they require a 10-year lead time for such a retrofit. Surely the minister's not going to put up with that kind of a delay by hydro. Is the minister going to allow hydro to manipulate the countdown acid rain program in such a way that we have to wait 10 years for new technology to avoid emissions from coal-fired generating plants?
I assume that I can't anticipate what the applause was for, except I would anticipate the question. And the member for Hamilton East has comments to add, and he no doubt has concerns about this particular matter as well. I can assure the member, as I did when I announced the acid rain program on December 17th of 1985, that indeed all of the key players in this under the regulation would be required to meet the stipulations of those regulations. They would have to do so within the time frame and the specifics of that regulation, and that is true in this case. As to the member's question about nuclear power, I can assure the member that this acid rain program that we have put into effect is not contingent on any particular nuclear capacity of Ontario Hydro, and that rather they must simply meet the stipulations of that regulation, and I intend to see that they do that, whether they like it or not.
New question, the member for York East.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of the Environment. Currently, there's a debate going on in my riding of York East about recycling. We no longer have recycling pickup in the borough of East York, and I'm wondering if the Minister can hold out any hope to the people of East York for increased funding in the area of recycling.
Minister?
In regard, sorry, I'm getting several interruptions. I'm trying to listen to the original question from the member, which was a very good one. Was concerning recycling, as I could hear it, and the amount of money that would be flowing for recycling programs. Well, I could tell the member, thank you, the member for Scarborough West has been kind enough to call order. I have an assurance for the member that the amount of money that is allocated for recycling in this particular year, as I indicated very clearly to the Recycling Council last Friday in a speech that I made on that occasion, is significantly above even the allocation that we had anticipated, which in that case was $2 million, which was the amount that was spent from 1981 to 1985 on source separation. And I can tell the member and members of the House that, in fact, the actual figure of expenditure for this fiscal year will likely be $4 million rather than the $2 million which was allocated, and that's because of the popularity of the program, Mr. Speaker, and the number of municipalities and others that have indicated a clear interest in it.
Supplementary.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Despite the popularity of recycling, there appear to be some municipalities who are somewhat recalcitrant. Given that this is a shared responsibility with the municipalities, can the minister tell me what his ministry is doing to encourage those municipalities into those programs?
Minister?
The financial incentive in itself, of course, is important. Also, our ministry has provided a good deal of technical information and other information to municipalities. I, as a minister, have encouraged them to become involved in recycling. Let me tell the member as well that our program is now a 5-year program as opposed to a 3-year program, so that there is a staged involvement in that program on the part of municipalities. But there's also a somewhat negative factor that contributes to it as well that we'd all recognize, and that is that under the Environmental Assessment Act, which is now applied to all greenfield sites, it is a much more difficult and expensive process to cite a landfill site or to establish a facility which would involve incineration. And for that reason, I think many municipalities are recognizing that it's important to reduce the amount of garbage going into a landfill site before it even gets there. And that's why the program has become popular, and that's why, as I've described, our ministry in so many ways is encouraging municipalities, financially and otherwise, to become involved in the program.
New question. New question, the member for High Park, Swansea.
My question, Mr. Speaker, is to the Minister responsible for Native Affairs. Chief Gordon Peters, who is the Regional Chief of Ontario for the Assembly of First Nations, said the following the surprised assurances from both the Premier and the Minister. We must have been sitting at different tables for the past 2 years. Now, I would like to ask the Minister, who I think in terms of his answers perhaps should be named Chief of the Clouds of Heaven when the Premier is Chief of the Light of Heaven, is he prepared to commit himself today that at next year's First Ministers' Conference he will follow the lead of the Assembly of First Nations and assure them that he will only endorse those changes at the Constitutional Conference that meet the approval of the First Nations themselves? First of all, and their fundamental principle that a government cannot give rights to Canadian Aboriginal peoples, which they already have by implication in the Constitution, but only be explicit on rights that are already implicit.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, at the meeting outside the legislature today, which was very well attended and very moving for one who's interested in Native affairs, I pointed out the 4 or 5 things that this government had done in the self-government area and in which Chief Peters participated. The Declaration of Political Intent was, of course, initiated by and signed by Chief Peters and others. The Anishinaabe-Aski Nation agreement we've made to negotiate was one in which chiefs participated. We have taken a lead in negotiating the constitutional amendment to which the honourable member refers. There have been 2 ministers' meetings leading up to the First Ministers' Conference. 2 more are contemplated in which the 4 Native groups play a major role. We have teams on both sides that are working to develop a compromise position for which the 4 Native groups and the required number of provinces and the federal government will be able to support. We've made plain our commitment to this process, and we hope it will have a satisfactory conclusion.
Supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister once again is well-meaning, but he is doing what he thinks is right for the Natives. And when the Premier said today that paternalism is dead, but I will speak for you, we are perpetuating that paternalism. And I ask the Minister, will he categorically say today that he cannot dictate to the chiefs of the First Nations as he does his cabinet colleagues? Why will he not let the First Nations of this province forge their own destiny? They should speak through us.
Minister.
We should not speak for them.
Minister.
The Leader of the Opposition really must get a Native Affairs critic who reads the material that's provided to him so that there's some foundation upon which a debate can take place. It's well known that there are 4 Native organizations. No government can dictate to them, and we do not propose to dictate to them. We are in the process with the other 9 provincial governments and the 2 territories and the federal government in trying to negotiate a constitutional amendment that will obtain the kind of provincial support
that is necessary if the Constitution is to be changed. We in Ontario are taking a lead in that exercise with the province of Manitoba and one or two other provinces. It's a subtle and difficult exercise. The one direction we're not going to follow is the direction that was followed by the previous government in Ontario.
New question, the member for Ottawa Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Community and Social Services. The minister promised a white paper on child care policy for June 1986. Now we're told we won't see the policy until January 87, and in the meantime, indirect subsidies to municipal daycare centres will end. And the minister tells us he's looking for the federal government to commit itself to continued and increased funding for child care. I'd like to ask the minister, why is the government waiting for a no or a yes on federal funding? Does he think this is a good way to get adequate child care for Ontario families? And is he going to make policy and programs, or is he going to beg for policy and programs?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Government of Ontario is not waiting for the federal government to tell it what it can or cannot do. But the honourable member would be well aware of the fact that at the present time there is a 50-50 sharing arrangement between the two levels of government. And in order for us to put forward the program policies and proposals that we would like to, that is dependent upon that kind of sharing. If, in fact, that kind of sharing is not going to be maintained, if it's going to be changed in any significant way, then that will very much influence the kind of program we put forward. I simply want to know what the rules of the games are going to be.
Supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I think this government hasn't learned the lesson of the softwood lumber debacle. If you need something from the feds on behalf of citizens of Ontario, families of Ontario, you go there and you say, this is what I'm putting in place in Ontario, and you tell us how you're going to support that progressive policy. And that's what you should be doing for daycare for families in Ontario.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, in terms of my discussions with the Federal Minister of Health and Welfare, our Treasurer's discussions with the Federal Minister of Finance, and our Premier's discussion with the Prime Minister, that is precisely what we've done.
New question. The member for Kent Elgin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question to the Minister of Agriculture and Food. Watch it. No, I wrote it myself. There's been a great deal of confusion, Mr. Minister, amongst livestock and grain farmers surrounding the federal and provincial stabilization payments. There's a small number of livestock people who are splitting their operations into a grain operation and a livestock feeding operation so that they can collect on the grain stabilization payment and still be eligible to collect on the animal stabilization program. I wrote to the Federal Minister of Agriculture asking him for clarification. He simply said that payments will be made on a net basis. He really avoided the answer. Mr. Minister, could you tell the legislature and the farmers of Ontario what advice they should follow in setting up their businesses, and what are the policies on stabilization?
Good question. Well, Mr. Speaker, I've received numerous submissions from various farm organizations, as I'm sure my federal counterpart has, to have included for stabilization purposes grain fed to livestock. And so I have discussed the matter with Mr. Wise in Ottawa, and my members of my staff have traveled to Ottawa to meet with the Federal Stabilization Board to see if indeed they are prepared to amend their program to allow for fed grains to be included under the stabilization program. The decision was that they would not. They have not in the past, and they will not stabilize grains which are fed to livestock. They will stabilize that product that is sold to an arm's length market. And if the corn producer is feeding corn to livestock, then whatever purchases are made by way of grain, that will be used to offset
whatever the stabilization he receives on the corn produce that is not fed.
New question. The member for Oakville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a question for the Minister of Consumer Commercial Relations. Mr. Speaker, I raised my correspondence with the Minister in March of this year a serious and increasing problem of new home construction delays, with which the Minister, I think, is fully familiar. He stated then that he had no intention of assisting the situation with legislation. Mr. Speaker, it now appears the best this government can do is to allow a resolution by the Minister's parliamentary assistant on tomorrow's private member's hour. It's hardly an answer for the thousands of people who are affected by this problem. In view of the fact the situation is now worse than it ever was, than it was earlier this year, will he now consider taking a direct hand to resolve the continuing problems between builders and their purchasers?
Minister.
Speaker, I thank the member for the question. The member should know that, contrary to what he is saying about the thousands of people who are being affected by this, it isn't in the thousands at all, and it's somewhere around 5% of the number of people who are buying homes. When you consider that 95% of the builders are responsible builders and are delivering their homes to the best of their ability. Now, certain things happen that they have no control over. Strikes, weather, things of that type. To bring forward legislation would not solve the problem. I've looked at the alternative, bringing forth legislation. If I thought that we could bring forth legislation that would solve the problem, I would do it. We have examined it, and we feel that there would be so many exclusions that the legislation would be relatively worthless.
Good answer.
Supplementary, the member for Wellington, Duffer and Peel.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to follow up on that to the minister, that if you're not aware that there's thousands, there's certainly hundreds, and especially in my riding of Caledon, that are forced to live with friends and in motels because some builders are intentionally delaying the home starts in order to force the buyers out of the deals and get better prices in a booming market. Would the minister at least consider legislation, a standard form of purchase contract, requiring interest to be paid on deposits during delay periods?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, those two recommendations are certainly under consideration. We are working in conjunction with the industry, and I am very aware of the problem. I'm trying to come up with a solution that is going to be enforceable. You have to understand that the building industry runs in cycles. They're boom and they're bust. And every time you do something at one end of the cycle, you've got to make provisions at the other end. And it's not an easy problem to solve. We are looking at it. We're trying to come up with a resolution. The building industry, which is the largest industry we've got, is very, very concerned about it. They're very cognizant of it. The building associations have been meeting. They are trying to come up with a discipline within their own industry, but there are various problems that can't be resolved with legislation. How do you legislate against a company going on strike? How do you legislate against a rainstorm? How do you legislate against a municipality that doesn't bring forward the building permits? These are all problems that would have to be excluded in the legislation, and there are many, many more, and by the time you do that, you have legislation that hasn't got any teeth at all.
New question, the member for Scarborough West.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Community and Social Services, although variations of the question could either go to the Minister of Solicitor General or to the Minister of Health, and it concerns again the situation in the Ellenvale Nursing Home in Eastern Ontario, where 3 developmentally handicapped youngsters died in the space of 5 weeks. I'll go to the Minister of Community and Social Services because incredibly there has as yet not been an inquest called and no push for one that I've heard from the other ministries. You have made commitments in the past, sir, to get these kids out of homes for special care. There are still 4 children under the age of 18 in that home, and there are almost 40 in their 20s. What are you going to do to get those kids into a proper home with proper care?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member will be aware of the fact that despite the fact that our ministry doesn't operate those homes, that we do provide the day programming for those particular residents. And so therefore we assume some responsibility for the residents themselves, even if we don't for the facility. At the same time, we have clearly indicated, and there has been a clarification between the Minister of Health and myself, that there should be a transfer of responsibility for those residents to our ministry. I have already made a public commitment that the children in all of those homes across the province will be removed from them and brought back into the community within the next 18 months. Now, that doesn't mean that nothing's going to be done for 18 months, but it'll be done during that 18-month period. And my staff is out now working very closely with the staff of the Ministry of Health to decide which ones are going to be moved first and where they're going to be put, because as the member would know, there must be a residential placement for them and there must be a day programming opportunity for them.
Supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I want to remind the minister that the member for Bellwoods first raised this issue back in 1978. And got commitments at that time that this would be a very quick process to get these sub-18s out of those kind of homes. As I said, the majority, almost 40 of the people in that institution were under 18 at that time which he made his first request. Although you have a tri-ministry person in there providing program, my information is that a week ago Sunday, when somebody went in to visit a relative there, they found children still in their cribs in the middle of the afternoon. They had to step over people in the halls who were lying on mats in the hallways, and there are only 3 staff members on hand for a total of 20 people. Will you make a commitment today that you will give us progress reports regularly in this House in terms of getting not only these specific children out, but the rest of those sub-18s at least, and I would hope those in their 20s, over the next number of months, so we can see practical progress and we can hold you accountable day by day, because these kids have been in there since in the early and mid-70s.
Order. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I most certainly recognize the work that was done by the member from Bellwoods, and there's certainly no quarrel or difference of opinion between us as to what needs to be done. And the request from my honourable critic is a reasonable one, and I will certainly do the best I can to accede to that request.
New question. The member for Durham York.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the absence of the Premier, I have a question for the Minister of Health. The board of the Uxbridge Cottage Hospital have been forced to take funds from an already very tight budget to pay the fee for a visiting consulting obstetrician to get the obstetrics unit reopened in that hospital. Now that you have forced your version of healthcare inaccessibility on the women of the Uxbridge area, why have you refused to pay the cost of getting that obstetrics unit reopened in that hospital?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the concerns which are raised at the local level about the people who provide service in their hospitals are, after all, decisions which have to be made by the people who are trustees for that community. They make the decisions about how and what funds will be allocated for what purpose. In that particular situation, the individual physician had decided that he wished to receive more money. I do not provide specific line-by-line approvals of what hospitals do. There is a global budget, and if they wish to make a decision about paying a salary to a particular person to become a member of a department in that hospital, then they are at liberty to do that. I must advise that when they make those decisions, they do them on the basis of the business information which they have available to them, and that I expect them to make it on the basis of the abilities of their budgets to accommodate whatever steps they deem necessary. I was in touch with the chairman of the board when this problem originally arose, and spoke to him about it, and had indicated that I was not able to provide him with a specific amount of money, a special fund to pay that particular physician to return to service in Uxbridge, but that I expected that if the board had wished to make a determination on their own with respect to what was available in their budget, then certainly that was well within their mandate to do so, and they obviously have taken the step and made a decision that their budget allowed them to provide a salary for that person.
Supplementary.
Well, boards routinely apply to the ministry for new programs, and clearly you have forced them into a new program. Will you then, if you obviously are not going to fund this program now or in the future, will you then increase their budget to return the services that are going to have to be cut
to keep the obstetrics unit open in that hospital?
Minister?
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's not usual, I think, to describe payment to a particular physician in a hospital as a new program. And in fact, he had been serving the area before on the basis of determination that he would like to provide consultant service to the practitioners in that area, and in fact visited, as I understand it, regularly, and from a place where he, I think, resides outside of the hospital that he normally attends. I cannot, Mr. Speaker, find from my own standpoint, that is a new program. And particularly, I cannot find that when a new person is employed in a hospital setting to be a new program, so defined under the means by which I would have an ability to fund. In this case, I cannot provide the honourable member with an undertaking to provide additional funds to this particular facility. We review the budgets and the submissions which are being provided to us on the basis of their needs, but I cannot do it in this situation. In addition, Mr. Speaker, they will be happy to know, the members here will be happy to know, that we, in fact, have set up a new program under which district health councils will help to advise.
Order. Order. Time for questions has expired.